Can science explain everything? Well, the law of gravity doesn't explain gravity.
What is the purpose of the universe? Science need not to answer them because they're nonsense questions.
God no more competes with science as an explanation of the universe than Henry Ford competes with physics as an explanation of the motor car.
There is not one jot of evidence. Oh, Jesus. Everyone knows here that's nonsense. There is no God. No, be quiet.
John Lennox and Peter Atkins came together some time ago to debate the question, can science explain everything? Hi, my name is Johan. I'm a Christian with a biblical worldview who loves to discuss different worldviews so we can understand why Christianity is the true worldview. In this video series we're starting today, I want to break down this almost 2-hour-long debate into smaller sections and discuss the topics as they unfold. As you saw from the intro, this debate got really heated. It's interesting in that sense, but today I want to discuss the main topic of the debate and dive into the opening statements. Can science explain everything? Let's see what Peter Atkins had to say about this question.
The answer is yes. Of course, it hasn't yet explained everything, but there are no signs that it's going to run up against a brick wall and stop explaining everything. We should first of all be clear what we mean by science. And science is basically a method of discovery based on observation. The second part of these introductory comments that I'd like to make is that we have to think about what we mean by the questions that science approaches. And I think there are two classes of question. One is stupid questions, and the other is real questions. And a lot of the stupid questions have emerged as extrapolations of human angst, worries about the nature of the world, projections of human ideas where they are not supported by any evidence. Science deals with real questions. Science deals with questions for which there is evidence. So, whereas a typical religious question might be, what is the purpose of the universe? Science can dismiss that as an irrelevant question. There is no evidence that there is any purpose in the universe. Science need not trouble to try to answer them because they're nonsense questions. Science deals with real questions, questions for which there is evidence. And some of these are very deep, and let's not hide them under a bushel. I think one major question is, why is there something rather than nothing? And science has as its objective an attempt to answer that kind of question.
Okay, Peter touched on a couple of things there, but first off, I feel that Peter's approach to the question of purpose is actually quite arrogant. The way he dismissed the question as silly and as a nonsense question, I think it's a major oversight by him. And the truth is that some of history's most profound thinkers have been deeply interested in the question of purpose. And I don't think it's arrogant for me to say that the question of purpose transcends language, race, and culture. Peter downplays the importance of purpose because he thinks there's no evidence for it. However, I want to argue that the existence of something is proof in itself that it has purpose. Take your iPhone, for example. Take YouTube, for example. The internet, the camera that I'm using to record this. Everything, examples of things that was created, and they're all created for a purpose. And if we conclude that the universe came from nothing, something Peter affirms later in this debate, we can easily argue that the universe was created. Thus, it has a purpose. We can even see that there's purpose in natural systems, like the formation of clouds and then rain, so that plants can grow. That's purpose. Plants grow so that animals can eat them. That's purpose. I think it's silly to see a world where every little thing has a purpose, yet we believe that humans or even the universe itself doesn't have a greater purpose. Let me know in the comments if you can think of something that was created, yet it has no purpose. Let's see what John Lennox had to say in response to these statements, and then we'll close out this video.
What is, of course, at stake today is the question, can the natural sciences answer every question? And there I think that is simply not the case. The Nobel Prize winner Peter Medawar, many years ago, he wrote a very interesting book on the limits of science. And he said, we do science a disservice, natural science, if we think it can address every question. And he referred to the basic questions of Karl Popper, the questions of a child. Where do I come from? Where am I going? What is the meaning of life? Natural science doesn't answer questions like that. And Medawar added it is to religion, philosophy, and so on, that we must go to answer those questions. I think science is immensely powerful. It is immensely exciting. But I have a problem by going too far. I'm a mathematician, and I'm rather interested in logic. And you know, if we say that science can explain everything, or science is the only way to truth, as it's often put, well, that is not a statement of science. It's a statement of belief. And so if it's true, it's false.
If someone makes a statement, science is the only way to truth, we should then be able to use science to analyze if that statement is true. But it immediately falls apart because the statement itself is not a scientific statement. It's a statement of faith. Back to the video.
To sum up my position, science is powerful. Its methodologies are extremely important also in the sphere of history, forensic science, and in the sphere of religion. But I'm going to be careful here, because Peter is right very often in his critique of superstition, of mythology, and nonsense. And science has helped to clear away some of the nonsensical things that sometimes religious people profess. But what really makes me, in one sense, very much in favor of the Christian faith is that from the very start it claims to be evidence-based. And the central piece of evidence is, of course, as you probably know, the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So I believe in Peter's methodology. I use it all the time, but somehow he feels that a Christian like me doesn't use that methodology within my own Christian faith. Final point, we need to tease out what we mean by the word explanation. When we say science explains, often it doesn't explain comprehensively. The law of gravity doesn't explain gravity. And I just want to throw a very simple analogy into this, which I find quite useful. About boiling water. How would you explain boiling water? Well, you can explain it by talking about heat conduction and agitation of molecules of water. You can also say the water is boiling because I'd like a cup of tea. Now, those two explanations are very different. They don't conflict. They complement. One is a scientific explanation, natural scientific, but the other is an explanation in terms of the intention and purposes of an agent. And Peter said quite clearly that science doesn't go in for that kind of purpose, but that doesn't mean that kind of purpose doesn't exist. In fact, people have been enjoying tea for millennia before they knew anything about the theory of heat in physics. So what I want to say is this. The God explanation is different from the science explanation. God no more competes with science as an explanation of the universe than Henry Ford competes with physics as an explanation of the motor car.
I really admire John Lennox. I believe he's an important Christian voice in the time and the world we live in today. I think his analogy of the boiling water is brilliant. I think it's key in this debate. It highlights not only that science doesn't compete with the idea of an agent behind creation, but it also highlights that natural science will always actually miss the agent behind the kettle, because that's not what it was designed for. It just always looks down into the workings of things. And when we look only with the lens of natural science, we cannot actually see the person or the agent that's standing behind the thing that we are investigating. And just in summary, I want to say that the way that Peter speaks is the reason why I believe naturalism is dangerous to society. It strips its followers of any form of purpose and identity. The theistic Christian worldview, as promoted by John, is not only compatible with natural science, it also provides a framework for understanding why there is anything for natural science to study in the first place. Before we can conduct scientific experiments to understand why the water is boiling, there must have been an agent with a purpose that causes the water to boil in the first place. This has, however, been a fascinating discussion. Let's continue the discussion down in the comments. I want to thank you for watching, and in the next video, we will look at John and Peter discussing the resurrection of Jesus. Please like this video and subscribe if you want to see the next one. See you there.